Baby.
We in here, yeah, we in here, 'cause we been.
Y'all better get comfortable with saying black.
We in here, yeah, we in here, 'cause
Black versus the Board of Education.
Cause we can't get rid of us now. We in here, yeah, we in here, 'cause we can't get rid of us now. And you know that we won't ever go because we been here.
That's why we are indeed a whole mood.
That's it.
You know what? I was scared. We're going to run it back one more again. Welcome back to Black versus the Board of Education. My name is Miss Laureen, and I welcome you into this space. Ooh, y'all. It almost took me out. Technical difficulties at the top of the hour on a Monday?
On a Monday.
Nah, we can't do it. So exactly how I was feeling. Absolutely. But welcome back. We have a lot to talk about. The episode today is called Run That Back. We are talking reparations once again because there was a whole firestorm that took place on Wednesday and we want to address it. But before we get into that conversation, you know how I do. I like to go around the room and let you know who's in the building. So we're going to start today with Miss Anaya. We'll pull Anaya up because she's been waiting very, very patiently for us to get our act together. Come on, Anaya. Come on off me.
Hey everyone, my name is Anaya and I'm currently a senior in high school. Happy to be back.
Well, welcome back. We appreciate you. Where's Adrian?
Hi everyone, Adrian, currently a college student. Second time doing this, so looking forward to it.
Well, welcome back to the party, sir, because you know we can't stop, won't stop. They tried to get rid of us. You heard it say, can't get rid of us now.
Yeah.
They wish they could.
Yeah.
Where's Jalen? Come on, Jalen. Hey, Jalen. Say hey.
Hello, my name is Jalen. I am a college student in this California area.
California area.
Yeah.
We're not gonna do this
We're
again.
back to do this. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Miss Keela.
Hey, it's your girl Keela, college student.
Oh,
Where-
okay.
where?
That was.
I ain't telling you.
She's in the region. Remember?
I'm
Oh
in
yeah,
the
it's California
Yeah,
region.
the California region. Miss Jada.
Hey, my name is Jada. I am currently a homeschool senior here in the Sacramento area, and it's glad to be back.
Fantastic. And where is the lady who's holding up the rear today? Miss Melissa. Where's Melissa at? Come on and introduce yourself, love book.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa, and I am a junior in Southern California.
Well, welcome back to the party, y'all. It started a little rough. You know, sometimes you got to start over, and, you know, that's all right. Aaliyah said, dust yourself off and try again.
Yeah.
So we just trying again. We just going to make it happen. But, you know, we're talking about reparations today. And, you know, we did have a conversation about reparations before. This was with the chair of the reparations task force, and we were able to ask some questions and try to get into the discussion, get out of it what we wanted to know. And so this time, as we run it back, right, there was an incident, not an incident, there was a press release that was released on Wednesday, I want to say, and this was after San Francisco had said that they would kind of consider reparations proposals that would propose $5 million for every Black person, and I need to go find the criteria, so give me a moment. But $5 million for every Black person, and you had one of the, I want to say he was one of the leaders of the NAACP in San Francisco that rejected that. Now, after that, he did come out and clarify his stance, and I want to read that for you really quickly. Let's see. So what you say, Jalen? So let me read his clarification. He said, Moguldom Nation said on Twitter, said, we just spoke with Dr. Amos Brown to clarify that San Francisco NAACP's press release. Number one, he is not against direct cash reparations, but wants that and more. Two, he doesn't want to set Black Americans up for failure and says that we need realistic proposals. 5 million is an unrealistic number. Now, this is where I'm at with it. Who is he to say that it's an unrealistic number? I don't know if y'all have seen the housing prices in San Francisco.
Crazy.
Insane.
For
I don't know
Little cottages.
exactly what he considers realistic, but the point is to really tackle the data, the racial wealth gap, right? And you cannot do that with $100,000 because you can't even buy anything for that in San Francisco. So, what is a realistic number? So you guys got it in the group chat, and I know I sent it because I said this is what we talking about on Monday. Get ready. So, Melissa, when I sent it in the group chat, what was your first reaction to? Let's talk about the press release that was released first. What was your reaction to that?
I have lots of different reactions and thoughts, a lot of which I don't really know how to feel because, like you said, what is a realistic number? But at the same time, reparations is also more than just money because we have been historically set back more than just the racial wealth gap. So there's a lot of other components. If it is going to be that $5 million, what else? Because that isn't going to just make Black people happy and make Black people be quiet and no longer complain, because it goes farther than that. So if his point to rejecting the 5 million was that, and I saw like the list of things, was that he was calling the community to do the list of like 5 things, there needs to be more, because it is those 5 things, but it is also the money, because there's just a lot of different components. So I feel like there was some symbolism there, that it is deeper than just money, but at the same time, money is also going to be very beneficial.
Right. Jalen, what were your thoughts on the? I'll read the press release after you're done.
Okay.
After I go around, just so we can kind of gauge where you guys are at. So go ahead.
I just think it was just like Melissa. It was weird, just because, like, first of all, I understand the 5 mil, and then it was just like it was a whole lot in that, and then also doing other research, and then also like getting the other things that they were asking for in that press release. I mean, and the thing was like, San Francisco, they want they want them to give Black people housing for $1 per family, like just on top of things like that. And I was just like, well, it already is expensive in San Francisco as it is in that whole little area. And like, if you're gonna give them, like you said, $100,000, that's not going to do anything there. So, and I just don't think that he did it the right way, because he didn't even give his stance with the press release. He just said, I reject it, and didn't even give like extra reasons why. Really.
So let me just go through it really quick, just so everybody who may be listening and don't know exactly what we're referring to. Like I said, this conversation is called Run That Back, because we've done a reparations conversation before, but we wanted to revisit this idea of reparations. So the problem that I had with this press release, and the person that put it out, he's also on the California Task Force for Reparations. Okay. And so when you come out with a press release and you say we reject it, I'm wondering what his stance is for the or what his input is on the California Task Force, and not just the city of San Francisco. So it says San Francisco rejects $5 million reparation payment to Blacks, calls for reparations to focus on investments and opportunities in key 5 areas at the Board of Supervisors meeting on reparations today. The San Francisco NAACP today called upon the Board of Supervisors to reject a one-time $5 million reparation payment to Blacks, but instead called upon the city to make investments in 5 key areas to atone for a history of racism, discrimination, and mistreatment. The Reverend Amos Brown today said that the Board of Supervisors, which is holding a hearing today at 3, should redirect its focus on providing 5 key elements as part of reparations: education, jobs, housing, healthcare, and cultural center for Blacks in San Francisco. We strongly believe that creating and funding programs that can improve the lives of those who have been impacted by racism and discrimination is the best path forward towards equality and justice. He called upon the city to 1, invest in education; 2, economic empowerment; 3, housing, healthcare, and then a Fillmore Heritage Center. Okay, so this is my thing.
Why can't they do all of them?
This is my thing. So
But that's a pick or choose.
the issue in California has always been Prop 209. Prop 209 prohibits discrimination, and basically this is how they got around really investing in education for Black students who are at the bottom, the lowest performing subgroup. This is how they kind of got around actually investing in the problem. They will say, well, we're in California, we can't discriminate. So putting that language in there, Reverend Dr. Amos Brown, and saying, okay, we want you to do this for Blacks. This is just another, in my opinion, dog whistle, because they really don't want to do anything for Blacks specifically here in California. That is my opinion. And so when you start to talk about housing and education and all that, those are all social programs that they could do right now if they had the will to do that. So why would that then be adequate, right? In forms of reparation. Reparations is an atonement for a debt owed because the work has already been done, right? So I need y'all to think about that in terms of, he's saying, no, we want it to go into education. Well, if they had the will, they could do that already because Black students are the lowest performing subgroups. Or economic empowerment. Now they have things out here where, say, for small businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Black people who have small businesses, 90-something% of Black businesses are micro businesses, which means they have one employee, which is the owner. If they wanted to invest their small business monies, they could do that now. So why is this being injected into the reparations conversation as if it's adequate to really kind of tackle some of the things that we're dealing with? And why does that have to come out of any money that they're promising us for a debt that's owed, by the way? Why does that have to come out of anything that they owe to us to then be able to say, okay, well, we're going to put this in and we're going to make it for Blacks what? Like Blacks from America? Like is it a lineage thing? Like what are we talking about? And so I want to be very, very clear. So Jada, when you hear the press conference, or I'm sorry, the press release and the things that they're talking about, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts were, why did it, like, okay, they're talking about all these things now that somebody had threw out a $5 million reparation payment. They're like, no, let's not do that. Let's do this instead. Why didn't you do before? Like, why did it take the mention of money for you guys to be like, no, forget the money. Let's do this. Y'all could have been done this. So it was just interesting. And you had made up a good point. It was like, who is it for? Because when you just say Blacks, that's for everybody. You're talking about the immigrants that just came in here because they like to group us in that term African American. But some of us are just ADOS, American descendants of slaves. And I think that reparations are specifically for American descendants of slaves. But when you just say Blacks, that's just like, anybody who's Black, come on in. But that's not how it should be. It should be for a specific group whose ancestors whose ancestors, gosh, I don't know how to put this. I'm just
did the work.
Yes, his ancestors did the work. Thank you. In
Okay.
simpler terms.
Built the country for free.
But it was also interesting on how he like went in to describe these like 5 separate things, like, oh, invest in education. Black students don't perform as well as their peers. For some reason, it was very demeaning. I don't know why I took that very demeaning. Like it was our fault. Like we chose to put ourselves at the bottom. And I was like, well, whose fault is that? Like, let's be for real. So that was weird. I'm not gonna hold you. I read that with a side eye because it was very confusing. But then when they were talking,
hold that thought. Let me go to Adrian.
Okay.
Adrian, when you looked at this, what were your first thoughts?
When I first read it, I was confused because this is stuff that should have been advocated for years ago. I mean, why is it just coming up now? We should have had this when the civil rights movement was over. And so I also get confused when he says $5 million is unrealistic. To me, that's not enough. Considering how much our ancestors worked and how much money they made for their slave owners, that $5 million is nothing compared to how much work they did.
And some of them sacrificed their lives, which is priceless. So let's keep it a buck. Hila, what do you thought?
When I was doing some research, kind of to piggyback what Adrian was saying, like 5 million isn't enough. Literally, I was reading and it says that 97,000 per year slavery for 250 years. So what's 5 mil from that?
Yeah. And I don't think that people really have an idea. So when we talk about reparations, I keep hearing this same mantra, well, nobody alive today.
Yeah, that's their best
argument.
Favorite argument.
Went through slavery.
Like,
duh. But
well, but they still benefiting from it because that money was passed down through generations. So let's keep it real. But it's not just for slavery. It's also for something called accrued disadvantage, right? So not only slavery, you had Jim Crow laws, which I believe they're trying to reinstate in Mississippi. Two separate, court systems. Okay. So you have the black codes, right? You had convict leasing, you had redlining, you had, gentrification pushing people out of San Francisco. No, 5 million is not enough. I think it's a great starting point.
Right.
I think it's a great I like the whole property for $1, but are you putting people out of properties that they amassed since they kicked all the folks out? Or are they going to have to find places where are they going to be relegated to tiny homes? Like those are the dollar homes? Like what are we talking about? And is it going to be comparable to what was lost? Right. And so when you start hearing people talk about things the way that they do, and they like Black folks are complaining, right? Because that's what you will hear out in the atmosphere. Black folks are complaining. Black folks aren't owed anything. And I think I see our guest that just came in the building. So we want to make sure we get Mr. Lodgson into the conversation. We done started without you. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good. And pardon my background, and pardon if you hear a little noise. I'm actually at Access Sacramento right now. Just finished the Tamaya Gaines show talking about California reparations, which I know we're going to talk about today too. So I appreciate y'all for having me. Good to see everybody. Good to hear everybody. I was loving the discussion as I was coming in. So please continue, because I love everything I was hearing. Just real quick though, Chris Lodgson, CJC, Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. We are California's first and only organization born just for reparations. That's all we do. And we are working right now to make people know about what's going on here in California per California reparations, and also help people get involved, especially our young people.
Well, we're absolutely glad that you fell into the building, because I was just about to get on my soapbox. But since you're here, I want to hear directly from you, because I know that you've been at all of the town halls, that you guys are doing something with the media, making sure it's covered. You're introducing people to the Reparations Task Force members. Talk about the process that you guys have been going through as you're kind of wading through the waters. And then I know there's some drama that kicked off last week, so I want to talk about the OMB as well. So let's start with.
There's always some drama. Yeah, well, so and for those who don't know, California really is still, from what we can tell, the first state to have a state level task force, or really a group of people. Let's just break it down into regular words, right? A task force is just a group of people who have a job to do. And this group of people has to create a reparations plan for Black Americans who descend from U.S. slavery here in the state of California. Among other things, they have to do two other things too. They have to study reparations with a specific focus on what California's role was with slavery and what came after slavery. A lot of people don't know there was slavery in California. California was not a free state. California was not a state that came into the Union with no slavery. There was slavery here in California. And so one of the things that the state task force or group of people has to do is study reparations with a particular and specific focus on what California's responsibility is, and then also educate the public, educate the people about what it learns, in addition to creating a reparations plan. And this group of people that we call a task force, they're going around from city to city here in California and holding public hearings. As a matter of fact, the next public hearings are in a week or so from now, March 29th and March 30th, right here in Sacramento downtown at the EPA building on I Street, 1001 I Street. And these public hearings are for you and me and members of the public to tell the task force what we want in the reparations plan. And that's one of the things that the task force is doing, is they're developing a reparations plan. That plan is going to come out no later than July 1st of this summer, so in a few months. And this is part of the process, and this is part of the process that the task force has been doing. And this is to your question, going from city to city, hearing from the people, hearing from the public, going to different communities. Our organization, CJEC, also does reparations Q&As. I know we're going to be doing one soon. Actually, later on this week with BYLP. So make sure y'all come out this week right here, Saturday the 25th from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. At the offices of BYLP in Elk Grove, so that you could ask your questions and get your questions answered about California reparations. So the task force is also working with organizations like ours to do these kind of things. They also are working with organizations to do what they call listening sessions, which is where people come and just talk to the task force members about what their story is, what happened to them, what their experience is. And this is part of the process. And this is how the task force is developing the reparations plan. There's more to come after the plan, but I will stop there.
Okay. And so I'm hoping that you guys just heard him say that the task force is meeting on the 29th and the 30th. And I'm hoping that y'all will go represent and go make yourselves known at the meeting.
I wrote it down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Because I think that they need to hear more from you all. I think that they hear from the older folks, but I think you all should have a specific input because you are actually in these facilities or on these campuses and you see what's happening with students who look like you. You can feel the difference in the way that you all are treated and only you can communicate your story. And so, Chris, I've been watching, I always watch, I always read some stuff. And
Same here.
And so I heard a soundbite of you and you were talking at the OMB meeting. I believe that's the Office of Management and Budget. And they were kind of getting on you because of the identity marker. So there are a few names floating around, right? In the reparations space. You have the American descendants of slavery. You have the freedmen. You have the Foundation of Black Americans. You have the folks with the older folks, the ones who
Negro.
Well,
right?
No,
right.
I'm talking about. I know about the Negro name.
Oh,
I'm talking about the other folks who were doing reparations who said that they've been doing this, they own this space or something, and they have their own way of saying that this should be a reparation should be on a global scale. It should have an African lens to it.
Yep.
And I can't remember the name. I want to call him NARC for some reason, but
it's NARC and Cobra.
In Cobra. Yeah. So you have that kind of faction over there who believe they should have a component where it addresses, from a Pan-African lens, all Black people and everything that is done to Black people. But could you explain very quickly why reparations in this country have to be for what happened to the people in this country?
Right. Yeah. And that's a great question. And thank you for asking. And yeah, in this work, there's, not everybody's going to agree all the time. And I think that's fine. Right. And I think there's things that we do agree on. I think that's great. The things that we don't agree on, I think that's great too. So what you're referring to is really the question about who is and who should be eligible for reparations in California. Now, the California Reparations Task Force has already answered that question. The California Reparations Task Force said last year that those who would be eligible for reparations in California are, and I'm going to loosely quote here, the group that's eligible is defined by those African Americans who are descendants of persons who were enslaved in the United States. So that is the right people, and that is the right focus for who should be eligible for reparations in California. What we were doing and what the Office of Management and Budget was doing, which is a federal national organization, a national agency that really controls what you see on your U.S. Census. And the question that the Office of Management and Budget has been asking really for the past 6 months, a little bit before then, but really for the past 6 months publicly, is how should the Office of Management and Budget change, if at all, what you get to select on the U.S. Census? And this is important to the reparations work because right now, at least outside of California, and really not yet in California, not yet. And I'll talk about why not yet in a second. But right now, we don't collect information at all on those who are descendants of U.S. slavery. And I want you to think about that for a minute. There's no city office you can walk into, no state office you can walk into, no county office you can walk into yet here in California yet, but also outside of the country where you can say, just tell me how many people here, just tell me how many people here are descendants of U.S. slavery. That information does not exist. And that's a problem. And that's something that we've been working to fix for a long time. And part of what the U.S. Census through the Office of Management Budget has been asking is, how should we change the U.S. Census? And last week, there were a bunch of town halls where the OMB Office of Management and Budget was asking the public to tell them how they should change it. And one thing I think to say is that everybody that called up did an amazing job really saying the same thing. Some people refer to this group of people as American descendants of slavery. Some people refer to this group of people as foundational Black Americans. Some people refer to this group as American freedmen. We're all talking about the same people, literally all talking about the same people. We have different ways of saying the same thing. The general point that we all made to the Office of Management and Budget last week was that you need to have a specific way of collecting information on those who are descendants of U.S. slavery, because we built this country. We've been here 400 plus years. And as I said, if I could use, I'm not going to use a bad word, but I'm going to say it's a damn shame that we don't have a specific name, a specific place for us in our government actually collecting information on it. That is a crime. And
Absolutely.
and that's part of what I added to my comments in the public town hall with the Office of Management and Budget. Last thing to say is, my recommendation to the office was create a specific category for those who are descendants of U.S. slavery. And I thought, and I still think, the easiest way to make that clear and make that understandable to the most number of people is just to call that place African American descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. Why? Because African American is already widely known. You just have to qualify that and say descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. That is the definition of American descendants of slavery. That is the definition of American freedmen. That is the definition of foundational Black Americans. We're all saying the same thing. Last thing I'll say is, last year at the coalition, we wrote a piece of legislation that the governor signed called, and it's section 14 of a bill called SB 189. And that bill will make California, starting in 2024, California will start finally to ask on its government employee forms to start, are you a descendant of U.S. slavery? So that's going to start happening here.
Nice. You said you had a question, Jalen. First of all, before you answer that, I want to know how you guys identify currently. Do you guys identify in any other way? Jada, what do you identify as?
Just Black.
Black. What about you?
Black.
Just Black.
Black ADOS.
Black ADOS. Okay. Adrian, how do you identify?
Black.
Black.
Melissa, how do you identify?
Black.
Okay. Anaya?
I agree. I'd say Black, African American, but I also realize, when I introduce myself to people, I'm not like, hey, I am an African American descendant of slavery. Although I know, did I say that right? Although I know I am, I'm just Black.
You heard from them.
Right. And that's important as hell. And I want to just say one thing. I think that's important. I don't disagree. I identify, when I'm talking to folks, sometimes as Black, sometimes it's African American, sometimes it's American freedman, sometimes it's American descendant of slavery, sometimes it's a foundational Black American. It depends on when I'm talking and who I'm talking to. But what we're talking about right now also is how our government sees us.
Correct.
Our government right now has a definition for all of us. It's called Black/African American. That is how the government sees all of us. And what we're telling the government is that's not good enough. Sometimes it's good, but it ain't good enough right now, especially when we're talking about reparations.
And they're not disaggregating that category currently. That category covers all Black people.
Right.
And everybody, if you come from the continent of Africa, you are technically an African American for real. Although that name was coined for the progeny of those enslaved, that's the name that has been. They matter of fact, they call that, what's that fool? Elon Musk. They could say he's a African American because he's from South Africa,
Uh-oh.
right?
He said something like that on Twitter, didn't he? And I thought he was joking.
He wasn't
It's-
joking.
Crazy. I didn't know
I,
that.
I thought he was joking, right? And now, and this, so you raise another good and important point. I think everybody here is saying something that's really important, which is, and this was the point I was just making, is how does our government define us? And so right now, the government itself, and you can just go on the website to the OMB or to the census website, and you can see right now the government has a definition of Black/African American. First of all, the government doesn't see any difference between those two. So the government says a Black American or somebody Black is equal to an African American, equal to somebody, and that definition is anybody. I'm giving you the exact definition: anyone with origins in the Black racial groups of Africa. Period. That's how it defined us right now, and that's not good enough. And that's what we're trying to change.
Yeah, and if you're wondering, I identify as ADOS or Black as well. Jalen had a question. Come on, Jalen.
Yeah. So my question is, if and when reparations gets passed, is there going to be any way to verify if somebody is a descendant of a slave? Because
That's a brilliant question.
Anybody from just saying that, any Black person that's saying, "Oh, well, I am," even though they aren't.
Yeah. So that's a good question. And the short answer is yes, there will be ways, and there are ways to make sure, one, that there's not fraud and people not lying about who they are and whether or not they are descendants of U.S. slavery. And there are and probably should be consequences for people who do that. So as I said before, the State Reparations Task Force, again, this group of people, they have already decided and said who will be eligible for reparations in California. They've defined it as African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. You could, another way to say that is foundational Black Americans. Another way to say that is American freedmen. Another way to say that is American descendants of slavery. We're just sort of using different words to talk about the same people. I have been saying for a long time
why are there so many different names being thrown around in such a short span of time?
Yeah.
Why is it that we have so many different, and I have my theories, but I'm gonna let you go ahead and explain it.
Yeah. It is. There's not one simple answer to it. It is complicated. I think it is partly because people have, different preferences for what they want to identify themselves as. Some people, and we heard this in some of the public comments at the Office of Management Budget public town halls last week. Some people don't like the word slavery anywhere near the, sort of how they identify themselves. Some people don't like the fact that, that they have to take away Black. Some people don't like the word African anywhere in the way they identify themselves either. So there's multiple different reasons to it. There's also, been some, and let's just keep it real. There's been disagreements among people about what the right way to describe ourselves is. And as I was saying, I've been saying this for a long time now, I care less about the label and more about the definition and the description of the people who you're talking about. I've been saying this for a long time. This is why you don't see me in the, the label gangbanging that be going on, and sort of the set tripping. And are you ADOS, that's your set versus you the FBA set. Right. When literally we are literally describing the same exact people. Right. Just some people have different preferences. But it is a complicated, sort of set of answers. And to Jalen's really good question too here, the State Reparations Task Force, as I said, has decided who would be eligible. They've also recommended that the state create something called the California African American Freedmen Affairs Agency, or CAFA. And in that new agency, there will be sitting something called the Office of Genealogy. And that, I think, will be the place where we will have the answer to your question, Jalen. What types of records will folks need, and how do we make sure that people don't lie and then try to say that they are something that they're not? So I would say stay tuned for the detailed answer to that question.
Okay.
And I think that wasn't there other criteria, not just that they be persons enslaved, but they would have to identify as Black or African American for a specific for a specific amount of time, or was that for the federal consideration?
That is right now. That is actually, I've only seen something like that in the San Francisco plan, and so and it's
Get on
important for
San
folks.
Francisco. We ain't
Yeah, right on, right
fooling.
on. Yeah. Yeah, I've only seen stuff around that for the San Francisco plan, and so the state of California has its own reparations group or task force, and then the different cities are working on specific stuff for their cities too. So I've only seen that in what the cities have, or at least the city of San Francisco has done. The only other thing to say is, if you read the book called "From Here to Equality" by Dr. William Sandy Darity Jr., who has been doing a bunch of great work on reparations for a long time now. He's actually one of the economic advisors to the reparations task force in California. He recommends, in his knowledge, that one of the requirements be that you have to have self-identified as Black or African American on some government forms for at least a number of years, and then also be a descendant of U.S. slavery. Now, there are some, and this is public, and we've discussed this with folks publicly and privately. There are some challenges with that too. One, because there's two big challenges with that too. Well, at least that first part, right? The self-identification part. Actually, part of the answer and part of one of the challenges is what Jalen just sort of brought up too, which is that you are self-identifying. So people can self-identify any way that they want, right? That's the first thing. But the second thing is for example, on birth certificates here in California, there was a time where your race was removed from your birth certificate.
I don't think I have one on my birth
certificate. Right. And so if that's part of how you need to be shown that you are eligible, that's going to raise challenges. But the real big challenge is the law and our Constitution. And y'all are very smart people. Y'all know the law is different from the Constitution. Actually, the Constitution you could think of as in charge of our laws. So you can't make laws that go against the Constitution, or else we call that unconstitutional. So in our Constitution and in our laws too, here in California, we cannot, by law and by Constitution, do things based on race. We can't make programs, government policy, give government money for a particular group because of their race. We can't do that.
They already do that, but we won't blow the whistle.
You can't do it saying it openly, right? You can't do it saying if we were to say reparations are for those who self-identify as Black for a number of years, period. So just check a box saying you Black and show that you have self-identified as Black. That will almost certainly, usually, be illegal, be against our Constitution because of what our Constitution and our laws say. So there's some problems with that too.
Yeah. Melissa?
So I wanted to circle back to a question that you asked earlier, Ms. Lorene, about why we think the different names like Black, African American, ADOS are used. I think, and I totally agree with what you were saying earlier, I also think that there is, at least from my standpoint and relating it back to some of my, just to some things that I have noticed, I think it's or at least the effect of it has divided us, because like you said, they're all describing the same things, but there is also the fighting between the groups saying, well, no, we deserve it more than you deserve it. We deserve it more. And I think it relates back to even within the Black community, aside from the names, but even the way that we describe each other and our skin colors, light skin, brown skin, dark skin, all of that. And that relates back to colorism, which started with in slavery and the house slaves and the field slaves. I feel like it's, again, another form to divide us so we aren't united to actually get what we need to get the reparations and to get what needs to be done. That's just an observation that I made.
Well, and I think that there's another part to that. I think this is my opinion. I think sometimes we don't have enough people willing to be second. Everybody has to be the boss. And so sometimes when you have one faction doing this and someone disagrees, they be like, well, bump that, I'm gonna start my own. And then somebody disagrees out of that faction, and then somebody else starts their own. So without being united under one cause, one leadership, one ideology of how to move forward, you will always have the divisions, because there's other people who think they're going to do it better, but then they start to encounter the same type of things that other leader had, because nobody wants to be second, everybody wants to be first. And so a lot of times that's what happens. It happens here in the nonprofit world too. We got too many people want to be the boss and nobody wants to be a nevertheless. I got that from Pastor Omar Tebow. Yeah, I'm just shouting him out. Everybody wants to be the boss. Nobody wants to be a nevertheless, meaning whatever vision you have as the boss, I'm going to support it, and I'm going to support it wholeheartedly instead of poking holes in the boat while you're trying to row. So I think we're seeing a lot of that that type of ideology permeating, not just with the reparations conversation. It's in the nonprofit world. It's in the corporate sector, right? It just keeps going, because everybody at some point is going to have to humble themselves and realize, well, you may be a boss in this area, but when you come over to here, you're going to have to be a nevertheless, and you're going to have to follow somebody's leadership. And I think that's where we get it wrong. Anaya, what do you think?
I agree, but I wanted to make a point going on. Someone mentioned how you would identify everyone like accurately, and I was wondering the same thing, because a lot of records of people who were enslaved are lost. So I'm like, how do you make sure the right people are getting their reparations? That was my thing.
That's a great question. Yeah, that is a great question, and that is something that I know for a fact that the State Reparations Task Force has been thinking hard about, working first and at least up until this point to get the thoughts and ideas of genealogists, and these are people who do this work every single day, whose job it is every day to help people demonstrate and show where their family came from. And I think the answer to the question really is about how we design the process for demonstrating that you are eligible for reparations. You can design it in a way that's easy, in effect, too easy. You can also design it in a way that's too hard. And this is, and I want to bring your question, Anaya, and Jalen's question together, because I think they're very smart and very related. It's really about how we design the process, and the process has not been designed yet. So we have really time now to make sure that we hear all of the things that we think could go wrong, and then make sure that we design it in a way that stuff is not in there. Jalen's question was sort of on the one side, what if we make it too easy, because then people could sort of cheat it, right? But then your question is about, well, what if it's too hard, right? I mean, because the records are gone, right? And so what if it's too hard? And I think what we're going to have to do is design something that is somewhere in the middle, where it's not so easy to cheat it, but it's not so hard that people can't do it. And I think that's what we're going to end up with in the end. But that is, I think, what we have to do now. We have to design it in a way that I think is smart and simple, and also takes into account what you all already and have been saying, that we have been done wrong as a people. Part of what reparations is about repair. It's not our fault that ain't no records or ain't enough records for who we are as a people. That was part of the breaking of us. That's part of how we got broken. And this is to the last part and point that we were just talking about. This is partly why you don't see me in the label gang banging, where I'm this label versus I'm that label. I really am, I'm really focused on the people and the description of the people that we are talking about, because we're all talking about the same people. It's not our fault that we're going through this. I don't want to call it an identity crisis, but we're going through something as a people right now where we're trying to define who we are to us. And that's important for us as a people to do. And that actually, generally speaking, can be healthy, even though it's messy and it gets hostile sometimes. And like I said, I don't really participate in the, I'm this label set versus that label set, because we're all talking about the same people. But this is part of what we're trying to fix.
Yeah. And I think that the fact that you're having to go through genealogy records should already be a clue that you probably them people that you're looking for. There's actually a site that I've been on. It's called familysearch.com. Familysearch.org. You can start to look up your family tree on there. Hey, Jubilee, you can start to look up your family tree. And I know I had to stop because I was getting very frustrated. And it's very frustrating because the census data, or however they kept records before, what they started to do is they started to kind of spell, like, I don't know if they were illiterate or whatever, but people would spell their name differently. And so my great grandmother, her name is spelled 3 or 4 different type of ways, and I had to go on 3 or 4 different type of searches to get to who her parents were and who.
Oh, wow.
And it gets really, really frustrating. And it's just like, you're a lost people and you're trying to put the pieces together, and unless you have the names of the people that you're looking for, it gets really, really hard to kind of piece it together. And if you are in that situation where, and I keep seeing there's different folks from, say, different places in on the continent that say, oh, well, the difference between us and Black Americans is we know where we came from. Well, then that should also be the difference in us getting reparations, right? Because
Right.
you know who your people are. I'm
Right.
still trying to figure it out, and it was based on what happened and what took place in this country. So it's just very interesting that we're still having this conversation and people are still not clear why this specific group of people are owed a debt, or a debt is owed to this specific group of people whose ancestors built this country without wages. And
That's
I don't know,
crazy.
have you guys been to the African American Museum
No.
over in the Smithsonian? We're gonna have to take a trip.
Yes, yes.
Because
Say
you and
that.
Anaya, it's mind blowing, right?
For sure.
It's mind
Yes.
blowing because you look around and you see like all these different plaques of information, and you know, you see these models of how they loaded people as cargo and made the trek over here, and then you started reading about the stuff that they would do in the slave quarters, right? And you're just reading this stuff, and then you hear all these vignettes, these audio vignettes of people telling you about what their life was like during this time. And I remember just sitting there and crying, right? Because it's like, you cannot imagine the torture that people went through, and you're still playing stupid. You have a whole damn museum. If you don't know nothing, go learn something. There's a whole museum there, and people still feign ignorance. Like it's just mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. And so, Chris, you're going to be here on Saturday.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. I'm looking forward to it.
We're looking forward to hosting you in this space. We will be putting up a RSVP link because, you know, although we do have an office space, I don't know how many people this may attract, and we want to know who we have in here. So we are going to put up a link for folks to join in person, but we will also do a virtual link for those who cannot be in the building on that day but want to come and join us virtually. We will have that capability up as well. So what can we look forward to on Saturday? And I'm gonna let my young people jump in here because it's not for me to just talk. What are y'all looking? Let me ask them first. What are you guys looking forward to hearing about this Saturday? What are you trying to get more clear on? Because we still ain't got to San Francisco, and I got to circle back to that because we got to run that back.
I just think for me, it would just be hearing other people's opinions to my first question. Just what are some ways that we could eliminate oh, I'm Black, so I think I should get reparations.
You mean for people who are not from here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the general, the flat Blackness is what you're talking about.
That's what I was gonna say
Okay,
too.
so you were gonna say the same thing. Okay, Adrian, what do you think? What are you looking forward to hearing about Saturday?
'Cause I had one question that was pending that I was going to ask on Saturday.
Okay.
Was why does reparations have to start and end with slavery? Because from my personal opinion, I think my grandparents who went through segregation should have reparations, and all the people who had to deal with laws keeping them under, I think they deserve reparations. So instead of trying to figure out who is a descendant of slaves, Why not just have descendants of slaves and, descendants of people who went through that segregation?
And I think that that's what it is. So it's slavery is not the end all be all. That is the beginning. That is how, because everything that came after slavery is still a function of that system. So it's not just slavery, it's the accrued disadvantage. We talked about redlining, we talked about convict leasing, the black codes. We've talked about gentrification. For Jalen keeps throwing that in there.
It's a good word.
That's a good word.
It's a good word.
So it's not just about the institution of slavery. It's the institution of slavery and everything that came out of it from this people who can trace their lineage back to the institution of slavery.
Yeah.
Melissa, even if you join in virtually, what you looking forward to hearing about?
I think accountability, it's a very broad term, but accountability just for everyone, accountability for the people who have caused reparations to even need to be a thing, but also accountability for, we've also talked about people who may try and claim reparations when that, by definition, is not for them. Accountability just for everyone.
Anaya.
So I think the biggest thing I'm looking forward to is, I say I'm pretty well educated on the subject, but I'm looking forward to be educated more. Like during this podcast, I've learned more than I have known before. And I'm also looking forward to hearing everyone's opinions and their stances on what they think.
I'm waiting to hear those stories that Chris was talking about. You said that there were some listening sessions and there were some stories that people were relaying. I'm interested in hearing those because I can tell you some on the education side of it. But in terms of the other industries or the other groups of folks out there, from the workforce to anything else, like, that's not my wheelhouse, but I can definitely tell you on the education side what's been going on with specifically children who descend from slavery. I can absolutely qualify that. You, Keela?
I was just gonna say more like I'm kind of opposite of Anaya. Like, I know little, so like all of this today has been like not overwhelming, but definitely very educational. So I'm definitely looking forward to like just learning, kind of like everybody said, just everything.
Okay.
More like,
well, we're gonna have to send you back to that first podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Right. That's what I was like, I wasn't in it. So I'm like,
that first one was
like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, I'm listening to everything and I'm like,
yeah.
Oh my God. You hear it, Chris?
I hear it. I'm loving everything I hear, and everything that you're looking forward to is what you're going to get. And what we're doing this Saturday, March 25th, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. at the offices of BYLP and Elk Grove. What we're looking forward to providing for people and actually being able to do for folks is exactly what you said. So normally what we do is first give folks what we call a California Reparations 101. So we help folks understand first what we mean by the word reparations, specifically as it is connected to the California Reparations Task Force, because the California Reparations Task Force, or group of people, they have a specific way that they're talking about what reparations means. And so we want you to understand what they mean when they say that word. But we also want to hear from you what you think that word means and what that word means to you. So California Reparations 101, where we help to define and understand what the word reparations means. Also, and this is important, what does reparations not mean? So what is not reparations? There's reparation, and then there's things that's not reparations. So we make that clear too. Then we give you the basics of the California Reparations Task Force itself. So, how did it get started? Who's on it? What do they have to do? When do they have to do it by? What happens next?
Yeah.
When can people expect to see and hear and actually feel some actual change, actually get some reparations? That's the basics. And then we answer every single and any question that you have and hear any thoughts that you have about what you heard. And that's really what we're going to do and what folks should expect on Saturday. Again, Saturday, March 25th, this coming Saturday right now, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m.
That's right.
All right. You already know. Be there. All right. Be there. It's free, open to the public. Be there this Saturday right here. Get your questions answered. If you be in person, or as we just said, there's a virtual link coming for you too. Make sure you there. This is the time to be a part of the process. This is the time to be a part of the fight. This is actually a time to get involved, because the task force is working right now on the reparations plan. So they need to know from us, like, what should be in that plan, what should not be in that plan, etc.
Jalen?
And then my last question was, I remember the first time we had the reparations podcast, you said that it was a 2-year plan. Isn't that are we in the second year yet?
We are, yeah. As a matter of fact, the reparations task force by law is required to finish their work and be done at least with the plan for reparations no later than July 1st of this year.
Okay.
So no later than July 1st. So we got a few more months before the plan. Now there's stuff that comes after the plan, though. We could definitely talk about that too. But yes, absolutely 2 years.
And so before you get out of here, because I know I keep saying we're going to talk about San Francisco, and you were talking about what reparations is and what it isn't. And I found the press release that was released by the San Francisco NAACP. I found that very interesting because everything in his 5 points for me is something that they can do right now without attaching it to a so-called reparations plan. And I know that he is one of the members of the task force. So what has been, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, what has been the general task force response to that press release? And I know it was walked back a little bit, but what was the initial response that you were hearing? Because you was probably seeing what I was seeing on Twitter on Wednesday night.
Twitter was on fire, B. Twitter was on fire, and not just Twitter. You know, YouTube was on fire, and Instagram was on fire.
A lot of vitriol coming towards the NAACP. Period.
Yeah, out of San Francisco, and you know, I was actually just to be honest, I was actually quite surprised to see that early last week, and there is a correction press release out now. I'm not sure if you've seen that, where they sort of explain what their position is. So I think that's probably the latest.
Will make you clarify.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I was, like I said, I was surprised to see that, and and that was a statement by the San Francisco NAACP early last week. Again, there was a correction put out, and in the original press release was quoted Reverend Dr. Amos Brown, who is a member of both the San Francisco Reparations Task Force and the California State Reparations Task Force. So as I said before, different cities are doing their own thing too, and the state is doing something for reparations too. And the person who was quoted in the press release that we're talking about is on the City of San Francisco Reparations Task Force and also on the State of California Reparations Task Force. And the press release was about the San Francisco plan, which I'm going to be honest with you too, and I've said this publicly also, has problems. If you ask me, there are problems with the San Francisco plan, which I think right now is recommending a bunch of different things. One of the things that has caught the attention of the media is the $5 million proposed or said to be proposed payment to each quote Black resident, according to how they define who's eligible. And there are problems, I think, with both of those. One, there are definitely some problems with the eligibility, and I've said this publicly too. It's not a lineage eligibility criteria in San Francisco like the state task force has, based on your descendancy from U.S. slavery. The San Francisco eligibility is different, and that makes it, I think, very, very problematic. But then the other thing that folks have been talking about is the $5 million payment. And as far as I can tell, I personally, I don't object to any numbers, to be honest with you. But what I want to see in addition is an explanation of how that number was actually created. We have to see how that number is actually created, because this is very, very serious. The State Reparations Task Force is going through has been going through a real serious process of deciding how much is everybody going to get. That is not done yet. And so I would like to see from San Francisco how they got to the $5 million thing. And I think that is what at least the corrected San Francisco NAACP press release says, and so I can understand that more. But when I saw that first press release, I didn't, I was definitely surprised to see that. And we'll have some more things to say about it. Last thing I'll say is,
wait, before you say your last thing, you want to tackle that question? in the chat?
Yes. So the question is, how do adoptive people get handled in the mix of reparations? And right now, at least at the state level, right now, what we understand is that the task force, again, will be, or most likely will be, deferring to the Office of Genealogy to help sort of define how people who may not have access to a lot of great records, right? And that so if it's difficult for some of us who are not in some of these, you know, government systems like the foster care system or, you know, the child welfare system, some of our folks will have a harder time than others. And so the answer to that question really is stay tuned, and the answer in detail will be given by probably the Office of Genealogy when that office is created. They will have some rules about, you know, this is what records you need, this is what records you don't need. If you're a foster care child, this is what, you know, this is how we're going to help you more than we help everybody else, et cetera, et cetera. Because there are folks who are going to have more trouble than others. You know, our folks in the foster care system, our folks who are, you know, as the question is saying, folks who are adopted, our folks who are unhoused, also our folks who went to the criminal justice system. Some people are going to have more difficult time than others potentially. Again, it's about how we design it. We can design it in a way that's supportive for those people, and we can design it in a way that's not supportive for those people. And I'm going to be fighting to design it in a way that's supportive.
And so hopefully Jubilee will jump either on the Zoom link or come into the office, and we can start to hear from her as to how she thinks it should be designed to take into account our brothers and sisters who went through the adoption process and their adoptions are closed. I for one, have never thought about that. So thank you for raising that, Jubilee, because I think that adds another layer onto what it is that we need to be considering and to be considered. So actually, she should also go to the open town halls on the 30th, the 29th and 30th, and put that on public record, because I don't know if anybody's thinking about that. So thank you very, very much. And you know what? With that, y'all, we don't run out of time.
Flew by.
That went crazy. Really
that
quick.
Went super fast. I'm not going
so fast.
Yeah, that was very informational for me.
So we need to make sure y'all are in the building on Saturday so we can come and we can start to kind of get a better understanding of what it needs to look like, what we think it should look like. You know, Chris will be here, right? Chris, you'll be here.
Oh yeah.
He gonna be live in person. We might feed him.
That's right. Yeah, better. You better feed me.
I'm gonna feed you. I'm gonna feed you. I'm just playing. I have some salads here for you.
Thank you, because you know I'm 100% plant-based. Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Well, we'll take some ideas. We'll talk to the resident plant-based eater.
He be eating quinoa.
Quinoa.
He be eating quinoa burgers.
That's right.
That's right.
So look, before we get out of here, the one thing that I want to mention is not only do we have this reparations conversation coming up this weekend from 2 to 4, we also are preparing for celebration weekend.
Come on, man.
Like we cannot. I'm like, you know, he was a little late on the cue. You know, I'm gonna have to start punching at him. But celebration weekend will be June 23rd through the 25th. We have a whole weekend planned to celebrate what we call in dripping in Black excellence. Yes, because I just came up with that. That's what we gonna call it.
All right.
Since we didn't have a theme, I just came up off the dome.
Jalen's birthday weekend.
And so Jalen wants y'all to know it's his birthday weekend.
Come on, man.
Congratulations, Jalen. And so we are looking to have a good time. Hopefully, you know, we can bring our people out to celebrate our babies because it's a big deal. It's a big deal that they can survive this education system in the first place, but to come out and be greeted by community is even better. So we want to make sure we get ready for that. So with all that, y'all, we're not going to do the wave individually today. We'll just wave and get on out of here because we over time. So catch us next week, 4:30, right here on Facebook and YouTube, and we will keep the distractions to a minimum, and we'll try to make sure all our camera equipment is working in good working order. All right. So with that, peace out. We'll see you next week.
Adios.
Whole mood, baby.